this is for God. This is not for anyone else. This is for God. This is for his kingdom. Because if no one shares the gospel at your school, like who else will share that gospel? No one else is going to be thinking about it if you don't share it first.
Hey, welcome to the Decision Point podcast. I'm your host, Mark Hobson, president of Decision Point, where our mission is to proclaim the gospel to the next generation till every student has heard. And hey, we are wrapping up today not only our series, A Call to Courage, but we're wrapping up our entire first season of this podcast. So thanks so much for being with us today. Thanks for those of you who have been with us since the very beginning of the season, or for those that have been tuning in just towards the back end. We're glad that you've joined us, and we're just so excited about what God has done through these 37 episodes now that we've been able to produce and bring to you voices from students who are out on the front lines proclaiming the gospel in a bold and courageous way, whether it's all the way back to the very first episode when we had Natalie on, who dealt with Satanists at her high school, or an interview that we're going to have in just a moment with Dorcas out in the San Francisco Bay Area, dealing with pushback from her principal, but also getting it done for Jesus in the San Francisco Bay Area. I know we've covered a lot of ground, and hey, you can hate me. I'm a deep dive kind of guy. If I get a great guest on the show, I want to talk to him for like 10 hours, but I'll settle for one. But I know that's a lot of content that we've gone through. And so I thought it would be fun today just to share with you my top takeaways from the series of what I'm going to be taking away from this. And you're welcome to take away whatever you want to take away from it, but these are my takeaways, and you can't take that away from me, right? And so, as we look at this call to courage, I hope you have this shared conviction that bolder really is better, that our times demand it, our mission requires it. If you missed last week's episode, here's Ellie in 7th grade sharing how she was already being bold for Jesus and losing friends because of that at her middle school. And then she decides to do something even bolder for the Lord. And God blessed it beyond her wildest dreams. And actually, people were far more responsive than she could have imagined because she was courageous. And so we want to be people of courage. So without further ado, let me share with you my 7 takeaways from the series. And the first one is this. First of all, we need to remember that there is a great war going on today. We really are living in times of a great spiritual battle. This is always true. We know this from the Bible. And of course, we know that there are times in history, times in countries where that battle rages all the more. And we are living in such times. There's a great war on truth. There's a great war on young people today. It's great having Seth Dillon on the show. Seth, thanks again for coming on. Seth shared about how there's confusion and deception just being cultivated and sown into the hearts and minds of young people, and how that really is the most important battle of our day. And I hope you share that sense that there is that great battle and we need to act accordingly. I think my second takeaway is this, that we need to remember the courage of others. We need to remember the courage of others. We can be so focused on ourselves. We can get so into the challenges that we're dealing with, whatever those may be. But when we step back and look at the courageous stance that others are taking, I think that really encourages us to be courageous as well. I hope you've been as encouraged as I have been by the students who have been on the show, whether it's during this Call to Courage series or throughout the whole season. I know I sure have been inspired by their courage. I hope you've been inspired by the authors that we've brought on to share from their expertise. But I also hope you've just been encouraged by Jack Phillips himself. Jack is the owner of Masterpiece Cake Shop. If you missed that episode, you got to go back and listen to it. I watched the clip this morning of Jack just retelling the story of the morning he got a phone call at his bakery of a man telling him he was coming into his shop to blow his head off. I don't know what it's like to get that phone call. I've never got that phone call, but Jack got that phone call. And it's a privilege to know him. And it's a privilege to hear his story and know that whatever, cost I may ever have to bear, I haven't had to bear that one, and he has. And he testified throughout the whole episode of how the Lord used that trial in his life to bring great glory to the Lord, great good in his life, and even bring other people to faith in Jesus. So if you missed the episode of Jack, you got to go back and watch it. Jack is the man and a hero for us all today. Number 3, we have a great opportunity to speak the truth today. We got to count the cost, yes, but also we have a great opportunity to speak the truth today in a society and in a world that has just lost its mind. And there's no telling the impact that we can have if we're willing in this moment, when we live in a society that is just corrupt through and through with lies and confusion and deception upon deception, if we will be willing to simply speak the truth. I'm going to play a quick clip from you that Seth Dillon shared with us. Seth is also a fan of C.S. Lewis, as I am, and he shares this great insight from C.S. Lewis from the book, That Hideous Strength.
One of the ways that Lewis put it is like a man in a desert who's starving who's thirsting for water. He realized his thirst for the truth and goodness and beauty. I think that's the situation that we find a lot of people are finding themselves in right now, is that they're hungry for the truth, and they're largely noticing that hunger because they're being deprived of it for the first time. They're losing sight of it, and it's making them hungry for it again. So I am hopeful. And obviously God is in control. So we need to continue to place our trust in him and trust that, that he knows where things are heading, and that he has plans for us that will overcome these forces that are trying to get us to deny the good and the true.
Isn't that great? Like a man in a desert who is starving, like a man in a desert who is parched and doesn't have water, we get to be the people who can bring the truth of God to people that will be life for their hungry souls. Number 4, we need to beware of 2 enemies that can really trip us up in our desire to be courageous leaders. Beware of 2 enemies. First one is simple. We got to be aware of the desire to be liked. Of course, we want to be winsome and gracious. We want to be gentle. We want to be respectful. We don't want anybody to stumble over our personality or us just being mean or ornery or being jerks or anything like that. But along with that desire to be liked, we need to beware that there's a danger there. If we are living for the approval of man, we're actually committing idolatry. We need to be living for an audience of one and be more concerned with what God thinks of us than what anybody else around us thinks. And there's great freedom in that when we let go of the desire to be liked and just say, I'm going to be faithful with the message. I'm going to be faithful to share it, and I'm not going to water it down. I'm not going to change what I believe or even change how I share what I believe just to help to have people approve of me. Will be in a much stronger place. And the second enemy we need to be aware of is unbridled compassion or unbridled empathy. We need to be compassionate people. We need to care about the wounds that people have. We need to care about their thoughts, their feelings, care about their souls. We need to be committed to the truth no matter what, and not let our compassionate hearts take us somewhere that truth and true love would refuse to go. Joe Rigney has done a lot of work on this subject, and I thought I'd just play with you a clip of how he said it, because I thought he said it best. So let's take a quick listen to Joe.
The danger of empathy is it kind of masquerades as compassion. It feels compassion, but it actually then allows other people to steer us by their emotions. So wherever their emotions go, we follow, and we become untethered from the truth and from reality. That happens in all sorts of situations. In our culture, that's a kind of really common way that people try to steer others, is by appealing to their compassion and manipulating them. There's a kind of an emotional blackmail that can come into play. If you don't affirm everything I say, if you don't agree with my choices and my decisions, if you don't affirm my identity, then you don't really love me. And that's what's behind a lot of some of the more, cultural insanity that we're seeing when people say, I was born a boy, but now I'm a girl. And if you don't call me by my new name and use my preferred pronouns, then you must hate me. When the actual truth is, no, I love you so much that I'm not going to let you live in this monstrous fantasy that you've constructed and that other people are manipulating you with. I'm going to be a voice of reason and of truth that tries to call you out of that and call you back to God's design for you. That's the actual loving thing to do. But in order to do the loving thing, you've got to be grounded in the truth not tethered to their emotions and wherever they want to take you.
Okay, I hope you were encouraged by that, as I was. Thanks, Joe, for that great insight. Okay, number 5, my other takeaway is we need to have courage to talk about specific sins. This was a topic that came up throughout the series, starting actually back with Jamie Bambrick. Shout out to you, Jamie, Northern Ireland, way to rock it, talking about how we need to have the courage to share the truth about Jesus, the truth about sin, and even the truth about specific sin. Jamie and Joe Rigney, both on the show, talked about how in the book of Acts, the apostles were clear about Jesus, they were clear about sin, and they were clear about the specific sins that their audience was either obviously guilty of committing or likely to be guilty of committing, whether that was crucifying the Lord of glory or pagan idolatry or anywhere in between. And so we too need to have the courage to be clear about sin and even specific sins. And I got to tell you, John Enzer has challenged me greatly in this regard. If you missed the episode with him, you got to go back and listen to it. John is one of the leading statesmen of the pro-life cause today, involved in pro-life missions around the world. And John makes the case that abortion is actually the best on-ramp for the gospel today. John shared a haunting story of having people in his church confess that they had been involved in abortion and realizing that they had done so in part, he says, because he had been silent on the issue of abortion. And shares a haunting story of a woman who said, I was thinking about having an abortion, and I just asked God, if this is wrong, would you send somebody to stop me? And nobody stopped me, and so I went ahead with it. And of course, God forgave her for that. But John said he had to do some repenting and say, God, I'm sorry for being silent on that issue. And then John just encouraged us, if we will just mention abortion as sin as we go about our lives, about our evangelistic ministry, we'll be amazed at how many people will feel the conviction for that. And also would be amazed at how many people might be held back from that. So here's a couple takeaways for me on this one. Proverbs 24 is clear. Rescue those who are perishing and hold back those who are going to slaughter. If we say we didn't know, does not God search our hearts? And so as we look at our world today, we know that people are going to the slaughter. We know that there are young women who are contemplating having abortions today while they're in high school, while they're in middle school. Medical abortion is making it easier than ever before for a young girl to go to the local drugstore without a prescription, sometimes, or even without parent approval or knowledge of it, take some pills in their own room, and nobody's the wiser. And we know this is destructive for the life that's in them. We also know it's destructive for them. We know many of them are being pressured into this by the men in their lives, or parents or family members in their lives. And we want to help warn them of the deadliness, the deceitfulness, the dangers of that sin, so that if they haven't gone down that path yet, they won't go down that path. And if they have gone down that path, they will find freedom in Christ by repenting of that sin and turning to Jesus. So we want to be specific about the sin of abortion. We also know, as we look at our world today, that the sexual sins are destroying this generation like never before. Here's one that we can be specific about. How about we be specific about pornography? The data is clear. If we're talking to a group of young people, if we're talking to a group of any size, of any age people, of any size, statistically, the majority of people in that room have been involved in pornography, watching, consuming it in some way, shape, or form. And you just think about this and you think, if we're not going to warn this generation about the deadliness and dangers of that sin, for goodness sakes, who's going to do it? And why don't we just name that as a sin frequently when we're talking to people about the Lord in a way that will help, by God's grace and His Spirit, grip their hearts, convict them of that sin, and help them see their need for a Savior? Or how about we be specific about sexual sins even more broadly? A verse that we're using as we're sharing the gospel now comes from Mark chapter 7, where Jesus says, out of the heart of man come, and He names 12 things. And the second one He names is sexual immorality. And so we need to just be clear about this. We need to talk about this with people as a sin. John Enser makes the case that the abortion and the sexual sins are the sins that actually weigh on the human conscience the most, the ones that their heart and their conscience tell them really are wrong, that if we just tap that, we can help people see it and name it for what it is so that they see their need for a Savior and then are more ready to actually turn to Jesus and be saved. Or how about we talk about the transgender craze or the homosexuality that's just run rampant in our culture, and just be clear, be gracious, compassionate, but be courageous enough to say that these things are actually wrong. We know that these sins actually lead to death. We know that people who are being led along down those paths, that all of culture is coming at youth, drawing them this way, lying to them this way, trying to convince kids that they could actually be born in the wrong body. No one is saying anything other than this. Their parents are going along with it. Their teachers are going along with it. Their administrators at their school are going along with it. Teachers are being pressured that if you don't go along with it, you'll be fired. If we don't love these young people enough to say, no, we won't go along with it, and in fact, we love you so much, we want to let you know that God made you, and He made you a boy, and He made you a girl, and that's a beautiful thing, and you don't ever need to change that. And also, if you try to change that, you are going against God who made you that way, and that is a sin. And if they're not going to get that warning from us, if they're not going to be held back from the slaughter that is the gender-affirming movement today, then who will? And so we want to be clear about this and hold back those who are going to slaughter. And so as I had a chance to share at one of the student outreaches recently, all of this series just helped shape the way I shared the gospel. So I just told students, I read that Mark 7 passage, and I said, hey, let's just think about one of those 12 things that Jesus said, sexual sins, and defined it. And students gasped that somebody would actually just define sexual sin, and they thought that was neat. Somebody's actually willing to say something like that, I think. Had their attention, you could tell. And then I challenged the guys in the room. I mean, some of you guys are just using your girlfriends for your own sexual gratification, and you're going to take no thought to the emotional wounds that you're going to leave her with when you decide to move on to the next girl. I got to tell you, it got real at that moment. You could tell some of the girls were like, yeah, I think they actually are doing that, and I haven't had the courage to tell them that. I think some of the guys started getting a little hot behind their collars. And I said, yeah, and some of you might actually be willing to pressure her to abort the baby that's growing inside of her if you get her pregnant. Okay, yeah, we had their attention. I said, others of you are so consumed with pornography, you've watched more hours of sexually explicit content than you could ever count. And here's the scary thing is you know that God is watching you every minute that you're watching that. And it's a sin, right? I said, some of you think you can choose your own adventure. You think you know better than the God who made you, that you can choose your own sexual or gender identity. And society isn't helping you. They're lying to you. They're brainwashing you and all of that. And listen, if that's you, I told them, you need to know that Christians care about you, love you, and we're here to tell you that there is a better way. Talk to the gals in the room and said, some of you are dressed in a way designed to get attention, like your worth is somehow tied up in your appearance. Or that you're giving yourself away to some 17-year-old guy who's made no commitments to you when you were made for the God who made you. And told the students, hey, if any of these sins describe you, there is hope, there is forgiveness, which of course we went on to share in the rest of the message. And then, hey, if none of these sins define you, man, one thing we all have in common is we're all sin. And whatever our sin is, we're all equally guilty before God. We wanted to make it sure that nobody could come to Christ that day without really coming to grips with their own sin. And I got to tell you, I was amazed as I had teenage guys come up to me, shake my hand, look me in the eye, and say, thank you for sharing all of that with us. It was almost like nobody had ever shared that with them before. And so that's a commitment I'm making. It's a commitment I'm making, I'm talking with our staff about to say, let's be specific about sin to hold back people who are going to the slaughter. Okay, 2 final takeaways. Number 6, never underestimate the impact that you can make when you'll be courageous for the truth. No matter how simple that act of courage may be, God can use it for his glory in ways that you would never imagine. I mean, wasn't it fun hearing from Seth Dillon? They just refused to delete a joke. I mean, it's not even that big of a deal, but good for them for doing it. To say we're going to use a little humor, we might even be a little edgy, but we're going to call out the nonsense and the lies in our world. And then if you try to censor us on that, we're not going to buckle or bow down. And wow, the wealthiest man on the planet buys Twitter for $44 billion, in part inspired by their stance. Go Babylon Bee, okay? Jack Phillips talks about how people who you never would have imagined he would have won for the Lord by refusing to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding have now come to faith in Jesus because they were just so perplexed that they wanted to come meet this guy who would have the audacity to say no, and found him to be full of the love, compassion, grace of Christ, and finally came to know the Lord. Or I think about Robert Morgan, who shared with us about let's never be afraid to be the 1%, and how one student or a few students at that school back hundreds of years ago in America, when everybody on their campus was making fun of them for being believers, had the courage to pray, to not back down, even when all of their school was coming at them. And by God's grace, they helped to start not only an awakening at their school, but an awakening around the country. Never be afraid of being the 1%. And last and finally, I hope the takeaway that I'm taking, and I hope you'll take away, is let's continue to be a people that have the courage to share the gospel with those around us. I tell you, all of our students out on the front lines sharing the gospel week in and week out pump me up. Our staff are out sharing the gospel all the time as well. But man, if you didn't watch it yet, go back and watch as some of these students from the Hope Delivery Channel are actually out sharing the gospel with their principal, with their dean of students, of course, with their fellow students too. No matter what, let's be a people that will have courage to share the gospel with those around us. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we're going to hear from Dorcas from the Bay, and then we're going to bring our season to a close. We'll see you in just a second.
Hey, it's Heather. What if you could spend 1 week this summer with like-minded students that love Jesus and together want to reach this generation with the gospel? I want to invite you to join us for Decision Point's Student Leader Conference 2024. Come be equipped to live, stand, and witness, and even endure for Christ in your everyday life. We'll be there in Denver, Colorado this summer, July 15th to the 19th. Students, youth pastors, and leaders will gather from across the country to worship the Lord, be trained up, prayed up, and then go back to reach their schools and generation with the gospel. Dynamic guest speakers will equip you in your faith. We'll talk apologetics. You'll hear from culturally relevant speakers that don't shy away from a biblical worldview, equipping you in even hard conversations you may face today. Come be trained in your leadership. Hear how to reach your school and peers for Christ and grow in your evangelism as we get to go downtown witnessing in Denver. You'll get to meet like-minded believers that will encourage you and even build lasting friendship. You'll have unforgettable memories, and truly, it is a week that can change everything. I can't wait to be at SLC 2024 with students like you from across the nation. So what are you waiting for? Go register today. slc2024.org. Tell your youth pastor about it. Come with a group of students from your youth group or Christian club and register today at slc2024.org. That's slc2024.org.
Well, Dorcas, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Hey, so Dorcas, thanks for being on. It's early in the morning there in California. Tell us where you're calling in from.
I'm calling from the Bay Area. Right now it's 6:22 a.m. So I'm so excited. Like when I woke up, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to do this podcast. I was so excited. I was so excited to come here.
Well, we're so excited to have you on. And for people that don't know you, where are you originally from?
I was born in Nigeria, Africa, actually. I came to the U.S. when I was 2012, when I was 8 years old.
That's fantastic. And you're now in the northern part of the Bay Area, not too far from Berkeley, California, as I look at a map. Probably Probably if you live on the ground there, Berkeley maybe feels a little further away, but North Bay, for those that don't know. Dorcas, you, a year ago, you decided you wanted to do something to share the gospel at your high school. I guess just to start, what motivated you to share Christ at your high school?
Actually, like going way back, maybe like sophomore year, like I was asked, or like I was introduced to the idea of Christian Club. And in the beginning, like I wasn't comfortable, and I was like, no, I don't think I could be the one who can start a Christian club at a high school. I know I'm going to get pushback. I know people are going to like think I'm crazy or call me weird names. So like in the beginning, I didn't want to create a Christian club at all. And my mentor, Anna, introduced the idea of Christian club to me, and ignoring her for like almost a year, I had to really check my heart and see like why of the Christian club in the beginning. Like what is the Christian club, and like the whole mission of it. And it's basically for all students to hear the gospel before they graduate. And so at that moment, like I was being selfish and only thinking about my problems and not thinking about the problems of other students if they don't hear the gospel before they graduate. So basically my whole motive turned to love Christian Club, to want to be involved in this mission at my school.
That's great. And I know Anna and her husband well, and I'm telling you, if you can ignore her for a year, you've got a stubborn streak in you there, Dorcas, because I would not want to be on the other side of the argument with that dear woman of God. I mean, talk about a stalwart woman of faith. So good for you having a great mentor, and good for her encouraging you in the Lord as she's done. Okay, so you knew it would be hard, and it proved to be hard. You had to deal with some real challenges just getting your first outreach approved. Can you tell us about that?
Oh yeah. So this was my junior year. So last year, the whole outreach was introduced, and it was pretty cool. It was so exciting to like involve the whole school. I was so excited, and I wanted to present it to my principal. And at the time, I asked my principal like, "Hey, can we like rent out the gym for this day?" And she just said no. And I was like, "Why?" And I tried to like make an appointment with her to try to talk to her face to face. I felt like that's a better way to show emotion than like just emailing or texting. And every time she gave me like an appointment date, I still couldn't get a hold of her. And I felt like I was being ignored. And the Whosoevers was our speaker last year. Their like date due, it was like coming up, and I needed to get a response. And I just felt like she wasn't giving me the response. She was just pushing and pushing. And what I did was I called the superintendent, and I was like, "Hey, I want to have this event at my school." And the principal said, "No, I couldn't rent out the gym." And he was like, "Oh, okay, I'll get back to you. And I'm so sorry." And the next day I was in class.
So you went straight to the superintendent. That takes some courage.
Oh yeah, I went straight to the superintendent because I was running out of time. I needed an answer, and she was ignoring me. So what else could I have done? I just went to the boss.
And if superintendent said no, you were going straight to the White House, right?
Yeah. I was pushing for it. I was like, "This is gonna be so fun." And I was in class, and I got a call for me to go to the principal's office, and I was shaking. I was like, I've never been called to the principal's office before. Like, I've always been a good kid, always done my assignments, like good grades. Like, I've never been called to the principal's office. So I was like praying, like, "Lord, I pray everything's good. Like, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to get detention, get suspended." And I went to her office, and she started yelling at me. Like, started yelling at me. She was like, "Why would you do that? Why would you go? Do we have a problem? Like, why would you go to the superintendent? Dorcas, I never had a problem with you, and I don't want to have a problem with you. Do you want me to not like you?" And I was like,
well, that got real.
Yeah, it got real. And when I get yelled at, I start crying. I don't know what it is. I don't like getting yelled at. I start like crying. Like, I get emotional.
I think most people don't like getting yelled at, Dorcas.
I'm like, "Dorcas, hold it together. You're not crying in front of this woman. You're strong." And like a tear like kept going down my cheek. But I pulled it together, and I was like, "Well, I'm sorry. I needed this answer now." And I felt like you were ignoring me, and I was telling her the truth. And she was like, "What was a better way for you to contact me?" And I was like, I don't know. And she was like, you could have emailed me. And I'm like, well, you weren't like responding to me. Like, how could I like keep emailing you? And I need an answer literally by next week. And I was like, just like, please let me know why you said no to the gym. And she was like, oh, because students go in and play basketball at lunch to keep the kids like out of the streets at lunch. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's a reasonable idea, but like, where else could I use? And she was telling me I can go outside. And I was like, outside, 54 degrees in the football field? You got to be joking. Like, I am not taking kids outside. No one's going to go outside for this rally. And she was like, what else can we do? And I was like, we could do something else. And I was like, what about the auditorium? And she was like, yeah, that's a good idea. We haven't used that since like COVID. And it's kind of dark in there, but we kind of worked around it. And that's where we got the idea to use the auditorium for our first rally. But it was scary at first. I was so scared. I thought I was going to get kicked out of the school or something. But I was glad that God just like emboldened me to like call the superintendent so we could have this event. And it turned out so amazing. I was blown out.
Well, I want to hear about that in just a second, but I was reading 2 Timothy 4 this morning. Dorcas, thought of you. Paul says, he's there getting ready to stand trial, and he says, no one stood with him, but the Lord stood by me and strengthened me. And, I thought about you and your principal's office getting yelled at, and just you there getting yelled at, but God was there with you, and praise God that he strengthened you and gave you the courage to stand in a situation that nobody wants to be in. You're not doing this to give your principal a hard time. You're doing this to give people the life of Christ. But way to go, getting strength from the Lord to persevere. Dorcas, would love to hear from you. I guess any reflections just on that. What did you learn from going through that?
I learned that no matter any circumstances, that I've been through, just to remain in him, that he is faithful in everything, and that I have to be obedient. With the outreach, just being obedient and having this event showed God's greatness at the school. It shed light into the school through the Christian club. And so it was just so amazing. Like, if I never started it or like kept a hard heart, it wouldn't be happening. So like when everyone was at the outreach, I was like, wow, like God is here. I was like, thank you so much for using me. You could have used anyone else, but you used me. And so it was like reflecting, like, thank you, God. Like, I could not think I could be in this position leading this. So that's what I learned. I was like, thank you.
That's a great word, Dorcas. I love that that heart. Who am I, that Lord, that you should use me? David, prays that a similar prayer that is like, God, who am I that I should lead your people like this? And I think when we see God working through us, it's humbling, isn't it? Well, Dorcas, way to stay faithful. We want to get to the impact next, but just way to go. You were faithful, and when you're faithful, you've already won. Like you've already been fruitful to the Lord. So way to go for that. But you also saw then the Lord do something enormous, both that week and in the year or two since then. Take it wherever you want to go. What's the impact that you've seen either through that first week or in the year since then?
Oh man, like just talking about it makes me so excited. Like I feel like Johnson High. Oh, can I say that?
Yeah.
Okay, Johnson High School Christian Club is like gotten so big, and it's actually one of our like the biggest club at school. Like no one is having that size of kids coming to a club since it's a really small school. And so people are like, oh my gosh, the Christian club is actually growing. And like from the first week to like having like 5 students to like the average of having 30 students per week, it's just blown out because we only have like 400 students in total at our high school. It's pretty small. So seeing 30 students show up like almost per week and having an outreach. Oh man, having an outreach is like the best. Like people are so excited to witness this outreach. And this includes involving our community, like our church, especially. We had an outreach last semester. This literally in March, and it turned out so amazing. My church provided a lot of the funds. So I talked to the congregation about, hey, we need money, we need help, we need prayer, we need volunteers to come out to this event and help us. And they showed up, and they prayed for us, and they used their resources, their time to come and volunteer at our outreach. And they just saw what God is doing at Johnson High School. We had a 2-day outreach, literally in March. The first day we had Joseph Goslin come out and speak to the students, and we hyped them up, and we threw some candy at the kids. It was so fun. It was so lit, and we saw students responding to the gospel. Like Joseph would say something that no one else would die for you, and everyone's gonna say amen. Like we had people responding to what he was saying and clapping, and it was so exciting seeing that. And keep in mind, we have like 400 students at Johnson High School. So we had like 150 students plus 200 students show up at the gym. So it was amazing.
So you're having half the school come hear about Jesus.
Yeah, it was amazing. And they're responding to the gospel. And it was just such a fun event to have. And me and Kylea, my vice president, basically co-president, she's going to take leadership next year for me. We had this idea to have a 2-day outreach. Students must come to the first day outreach to receive the gospel and to hear the gospel, and they must have their ticket with them on the second day, which the second day was a carnival outside in the field, which was fun. It was summery, and we had a bunch of games from my church, and they provided candy verses on pieces of candy, like tons and tons of 1,000 pieces of candy. Like, you know, the I choose, the candy I choose, and they made like punchlines. I choose Jesus, and had like a Bible verse on each piece of the candy. And we were able to pass those candy out to the students. So as they were eating the candy, they could read the verses on the candy. And so just like seeing students like reading the Bible verses like out loud, like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Like Jesus was being glorified in every single thing we were doing. And this is because of the community that provided all those resources for us. And this is because of the student volunteers were excited that we're going to have another outreach of sharing the gospel. And so our events have been so popular that in March, after our outreach, the principal came up to me and Kylea and said, we should do this every year.
Wait, the same principal?
Okay, so no, it was a different principal. Sorry.
Okay,
so we had
but still amazing.
It's still amazing. But the last principal from last year moved, so we have a new principal, and she was like, "We should do this every year," and we were just like, "Yes!" Like me saying yes, no, I can't be here next year. It's just like, no, like imagining me being there and just be able to continue to lead this event is just, it warms my heart that Jesus has been glorified in everything that I'm doing. So I'm so excited.
You're going to have to fail a class so you can do one more senior year, Dorcas.
I know. But I'm super excited for my co-president next year, Kylea, to what she's going to do next year. I know it's going to be so big. I know so many people will want to come, and I'm so excited for Johnson High School.
That's amazing. And Dorcas, a few final questions for you. One, as you look back on the last couple of years, how have you seen the gospel changing the atmosphere at your school? People
are curious to know more. Like some people like have a hard heart, not going to lie. Some people are like, I don't know about Christianity because of like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and like they only see a tiny point of view of it. They don't see it as a whole or as the word of God. And so they want to know more about it. And the people who want to know more about it, they keep coming to the Christian club and they keep asking questions. And one thing at my club is that we have my Pastor Todd, come out and do Q&As. And so students can ask anything they want and he will answer it from the Bible. And like a question came up, why does good people go to hell? And man, he summarized it amazingly. And he was like, basically hell is just like a separation of God. Like, if you don't want to do anything with him, hell is a place where you go because you don't want to do anything with God. So that's why good people go to hell. That's basically a summary. And so people just like become more hungry and want to know who God is even more. And so, and now we have Bible studies every Wednesday in the month of May, and students have been coming to it. So it's after school. Students have been coming to it to want to know even more about who Jesus is. So I think also like inviting them to church. I've invited a couple students to church, which was pretty exciting. They want to know more. And we'll be giving out some Bibles, which was pretty cool because they want to know more. So I think it takes little baby steps for them to really say, I want to give my life to Christ. So, and I've been seeing those steps.
That's great. And of course, I love also how the student there in Cupertino was answering that question to one of his like dean of students who was asked the same question about hell. And he said, well, of course, I know you know this and your pastor knows this, the whole thought, well, no, there are no good people that go to hell. That's assuming that there are good people and we're all sinners and we all deserve God's judgment. Yeah. You really have to help people understand that, as I'm sure your pastor did that day too. Well, Dorcas, final question for you. What would you say to students? Maybe they're thinking the same thing as you. How could God use me? Or I don't know if I really want to get into this. Or maybe they're going through the challenges. Any final word of encouragement to your peers across the country listening to you today?
Just know that I was in that position. Well, I am in that position I didn't want to do the Christian club in the beginning. I was so scared of what other people might think about me. But you cannot rely on what other people think of you. Like, that is what basically like emboldened me even more. Like, not to care about what other people think about you. That will literally remove some chains, not to care, and just care what God think about you. And that just like opened my eyes to even like a bigger perspective, a bigger point of view. So just trying to make God proud. Like, hey, God, this is for you. I owe you everything. Like, you have my life, you have my heart, you have my studies, my school, my friends, you have everything. And that will basically lead you, and that will give you grace, that will give you strength to know that this is for God. This is not for anyone else. This is for God. This is for his kingdom. Because if no one shares the gospel at your school, like, who else will share that gospel? No one else is going to be thinking about it if you don't share it first.
Wow, wasn't that great to hear from Dorcas? I love her heart and love all of our students. We really do have the boldest students in America in this program. Shout out to each and every student leader, whether we've had the chance to have you on the show this season or not. You guys are all an inspiration. You guys are the heroes of this mission, and our whole team is here to help you stand strong for the Lord, live for him, witness for him, and endure all the hardship that comes along with it, because Jesus is worth it. So keep going. I was talking to a guy in Australia the other day, and he said he's a teacher in a school in Australia, and he's actually been sharing these episodes with students at his school so they can hear from you guys and be inspired to share the gospel in their schools in Australia. You guys have made an impact by coming on the show in ways I don't think you'll even know. So thanks for that. Guests, thanks for taking your time to come on. We're so grateful to each of you. Huge respect for you, your expertise, your life, your leadership, your example. You're an inspiration. Thank you. I want to thank our production team. Hey, this is our first podcast. We were learning as we went. Thanks to all of our staff who've helped to make it happen. I want to give a special shout out to Ryan Smith, to John Cordova, to Jennifer Hagan, to Robert Brown, Shannon Long, Sydney, as well. Thank you, all of our staff, for helping make this possible. Thanks Scott Caro and SK Media Group for help with the production. And thank you, Find the Door ministry partners. None of this would be possible without people like you standing with us, standing with these students through your prayers and your sacrificial support to help make this mission possible. Friends, we've got a great next year lined up. Students, it's not too late to join us in Denver, Colorado, July 15 to 19. Go to slc2024.org to sign up. It won't be the same without you. And friends, we have an amazing summer lined up. We have an incredible next school year lined up. But it really is only possible through the prayers and financial support of people like you. If you've been blessed by the mission or you believe in the mission, would you consider going to decisionpoint.org today to make a gift of any amount to help move this mission forward? We have a crucial goal of some funds that we need to see come in by the end of May. So if you're in a position to give $5, $500, $5,000, or any amount, we'd welcome your support and partnership in this mission. We're going to take a break for the summer. We'll come back in August. We can't wait to see you then. In the meantime, let's keep standing, living, witnessing for Christ, and enduring hardship for his name, because he is worth it. We'll see you soon.